Happy Tuesday.
Thank you, Ron.
Lady apparently
We got one thing right.
the health effect.
We're waiting for Mark, right?
He's on his way.
Right.
Speaking of Mark, perfect timing.
This is open work session, September 6, 2016, Wycomico County Council. First item on the agenda is the development impact fee. Good evening.
Good evening. How's everybody doing tonight?
Doing well.
Excellent. In light of the hour, we'll try to keep this concise and brief.
It's early.
Thank you, Mr. Kramer. It's that time again where as a county, we're looking at what are our options with the impact fee as it relates to, as a function of new development, residential development specifically. As a few of the members know, but I figured it would be good for background purposes, I just wanted to kind of give you a snapshot of the historical efforts that have related to this impact fee over the past 14 years. Really goes back to a time in 2004 when Tischler Bice, who is an expert at determining impacts associated with development, both residential and commercial development on facilities, did a study for Wycomico County. As a result of that study, it was a recommendation for the consideration of the council at that time, because it was a council form of government, the executive form of government had not come online yet, to look at implementing impact fees. As part of the study, the associated impacts with new development was factored out for both schools, roads, community colleges, and it looked at a multitude of uses, residential, both single-family and multifamily, as well as commercial. At that time, the elected body moved forward with implementing the school impact fee for residential growth only, and that would be for multifamily and single-family development, and the report set the fees. It's important to know that when you're working with impact fees, you have to have a defensible number. Essentially, what you're charging as a fee, there has to be what's called an essential nexus that you can make, that the impact of new development is in accordance with what a fee may be and what a fee, how it's set. So at that time, everyone knows we had single-family housing units at $5,231 per unit, and we had multifamily at $1,524. The market was good. Market was real good. Even though we were just about at the cusp of seeing the downturn, we're averaging on pace of 200 new single-family constructs a year. Fee got implemented, years go by, downturn in the economy, housing sectors hit tremendously. Over the past 6 to 7 years, we've struggled to see on average anywhere from 60 to 74 new dwelling units per year, single family. And multifamily is cyclical. You'll have a big influx, maybe one every 10 years of a big complex such as Addison Court, where you see 300 units in a given year. However, those are the anomaly. What you usually see is about anywhere from 30 average-wise multifamily townhomes being built in the municipalities. So where does this get us now? Well, since July 2014, in an effort to stimulate this sector of the economy, the county, being the executive and the council, have agreed to a myriad of different alternative approaches to try to jumpstart this sector. And maybe it's an unfair assessment of saying jumpstart, really trying to just sustain, not even trying to expand at this point, because we know the numbers pre-bust are very hard to achieve in this economy. So we did an economic development grant initiative. And I think it was approximately $400,000, and it was 74 permits for single-family housing constructs that started in Wycomico County. Did we see a response to that? Yes. Was it the response we were looking for as a county? Yes. What does that mean? We averaged out about 74 houses for that given fiscal year. In any given fiscal year over the past 10 years, we average out about 74 houses. Well, we saw that go, and we heard that wasn't enough. So what was the next step?
What do you mean it wasn't enough?
That the industry, especially the sector, the trade sector, was still suffering. It was not enough to keep the construction activity at a pace to really be an economic development initiative and keeping people working.
Was it a need for these houses to be built? Was there a big demand for housing?
There's one way to look at that, Councilman Davis. Every year, about 1,000 persons come into Wycomico County. That translates to about 250 housing units. Some of those housing units are going to be absorbed through existing stock. Others are going to be as a part of new development. However, there's always a need to have housing options. Not everyone wants to live in a multifamily unit. Not everyone wants to own an existing home. Not everyone wants to build a new home. So again, it kind of goes back to the options. The market dictates the demand. And what we saw was that for the grant monies that were out there, they were exhausted very quickly, meaning there was demand
To build.
to build new construction, single-family construction.
Were they built and sold, or did they build and sit?
At this point, I couldn't give you a 100% accurate assessment. However, they were built. The lots are no longer just empty lots sitting on the tax roll that a developer's responsible for. However, the amount of sales, that would be something hard to gauge at this time.
I think that's part of what we had asked for the first time we did this.
What's that,
We
John?
asked for some type of tracking to see how successful the program was, whether you could actually attribute it to the impact fee or not impact fee. And then I believe when it was renewed after the first period of time, I believe it was a 6-month trial period or whatever.
It was a 6-month, the first
Right.
trial
We didn't have
period.
too many statistics, so we said, all right, well, we'll do it for another year, but see if we can't track it and find out if this is
Well,
really the correct way to create the incentive or not. And I
Absolutely.
don't think we've really seen that. I don't know.
Well, I think
how easy that
a lot of
process
it is very difficult to track. While we could pull in some quantitative numbers, I don't know if it's going to apparently have a tipping point or not. What's good? 74 houses, 100 houses. I don't know where that tipping point is, but at some point, it was important enough that we continued this effort for another 16 months as a moratorium.
Didn't the initial one, though, actually have them fill out some type of,
It was a
Yeah.
grant paperwork
Yeah.
of who built the homes and a little bit of information, but no information regarding, for example, where building materials were coming from. I think it might have had some minor information about how many employees. However, again, was that in longevity or was that just a short term, looking at the construction of that house?
Steve did a study, did some work on that, right, Steve?
Yeah, we did. I don't have it with me. I'm not prepared to discuss it.
Mr. Roser's internal audit really just looked at the accounting measures that the department was using to make sure they were sound practices.
Process, yeah.
However, there might have been some industry standards that might apply across the board. I know we do have representatives here from the building industry that maybe they could opine in more detail on that.
I know that you can come up with general terms and saying, okay, a house costs $150,000 to build, or it costs this much in materials, it gives you that many jobs. We've created economic development. But I think we were looking for something more specific, some real figures and data that showed exactly how that improvement was made. But
Well, I think, again, that there's a challenge here. However, I will defer to the market specialists. I think what this has come down to as far as an executive function, we are coming up on the December 31st deadline for the moratorium.
right.
An action will need to be made. We're trying to keep it outside of an emergency legislation. Therefore, we've got to start considering what the alternatives are now. One of the things we do know by the repeal of the impact fee is it is not going to adversely affect the construction sector and the trades that go along with it. Right now, you have an unfair burden that's being associated to one sector of the economy that is not doing anything to help stimulate, let alone preserve and sustain what we're currently looking for with regards to numbers of people into that field. Therefore, that's why one of the reasons why the executives introduced this legislation to the council to consider is because we know moving forward, we still see a downturn in the economy. While we do have a slight uptick, we know that tradespersons are very hard to find, and there's not really a lot of work for them right now. And while we've created this market over the past 18 to 24 months, using various economic development initiatives, whether grants or a moratorium, it's not projected to be sustainable moving forward if we go back to a full use of an impact fee, especially as it relates to the single-family residential development.
You know, it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple here. You know, we've had this BAT technology, that was costing $10,000 or $11,000 a year. You've got sprinklers that we're not getting rid of, it doesn't seem to be. You've got, you had a $5,000 impact fee. You're looking at $25,000 increase to cost of building a home in the county.
Yes, sir.
If this BAT technology, getting rid of it, cuts 10,000, if we can cut another 5 or keep it cut. Lots are at an all-time low right now, cost of building lots. It's got to help.
To Joe's
It's got to
point,
help. It
to
really
Joe's
does.
point, the median price of a home in Wycomico County for the better part of the past 18 months has been about
Are
$155,000.
you talking about a used home selling now, Wayne, or
What's
build?
selling?
Okay.
Well, I don't know what's selling. It
Okay.
could be a new home or it could be an existing
Across the
home.
board.
I'm just tracking
Yeah, the
the
sales
median price. So the single-family impact fee is $5,200. That's 3.35% of the value, or the median value. And, many times we sit here, we did it earlier this evening with Ella, and we said, oh, here's another state mandate, something else that the state's done to us. Well, the state did place BAT sprinklers. We had no choice in that. We do have a choice here. There's clearly a barrier here over which we have control. And it becomes, I think, a philosophical discussion as to whether or not we think we should view this from a stimulus standpoint, or whether we should view this is an unnecessary barrier to an industry that is struggling. And when you look at it, to Keith's numbers, 74, 75 single-family homes, you're talking $385,000 a year. The Board of Education's budget, this is for schools, Board of Education's budget, operating and P&I, is $52,437,000. $384,000 doesn't make a whole lot of difference.
Well, I agree.
Depends on who you cut.
I agree now.
But my point is that it's very hard to argue, oh gee, without this impact fee, we're really stressing our ability to afford our school system. The other issue is, if you built a new home, John, if I built a new home, my kids live in another state.
Yeah,
So why am I paying an impact fee for local schools when I don't have any children in the school system?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I know that's what Mark's always said. He's felt that it was just punishing people who wanted to build a new house. Whereas if someone moved here with 10 kids and wanted to buy a house,
If you did a head
No
count on
impact
kids.
whatsoever.
Right,
If
and
they
there's-
bought an existing single-family dwelling,
my
So it's,
my question would be, it's how do we think this falls in budget-wise as we come into the next fiscal year? A $300,000 hit. We're looking at the
It's-
Worcester scholarship that we just implemented, and we've got a huge CIP that we're paying for.
well, our budgeted new revenue
Right.
for this year is $123 million. That doesn't count carry forward, that kind of thing. So the $385,000 is 0.003%. It's a third of 1% of the revenue budget. And again, I come back to, from my standpoint, it really isn't a fiscal argument. It's have we created a barrier that's unnecessary and that is inherently perhaps unfair, and should we keep it in place when it's very hard to argue that fiscally it's needed?
Here's the other thing about this impact fee that always got under my skin is it's very unfair when you talk about the $1,500 for the apartments.
Correct.
And the $5,200.
Sure.
somebody can move to Wycomico County and move in an apartment with 4 kids. They impact the schools, they impact the roads, the kids don't. But, you know, the impact overall of the family, just as much as the people that build a new home is paying $5,200. And some of the people build a new home might not have any children. So it's, I don't know, when these Tischler or whatever their names were, did this report, I wasn't here, that was a couple years before I got on the council, but I would have questioned that very strongly. I thought that was a very lopsided.
That's our point.
And then I think there's also the inequity of surrounding counties and Wycomico County and building a home. When you look at surrounding Lower Shore counties without an impact fee,
Nobody has an impact for you.
then that lends itself to an unfair playing, unlevel playing field, I should say,
Well-
when it comes to new construction.
If we were going to have an impact fee, I think it should be even across the board, if we were going to have one.
John?
Actually, I think we have two different issues here. One of them is what the impact fee is designed to do. And we don't have confidence in that, let's face it. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. So we could throw that off the table and say, well, we need to rebuild that if we're going to keep the impact fee. And I think that's a given. The other thing is, we're saying 3.5% is going to deter somebody from buying something that they want. And that's sort of foolish to say 3.5% also will deter them. I mean, a bat system that costs 10% and a sprinkler system that costs 12% or 14%, that might deter them. But 3.5% is not going to
I
impact.
think the argument was on top of everything else, not when you're looking at it from a standalone perspective.
Sprinklers haven't.
But I do agree.
But we
Very
are,
valid point.
right
You're
this
looking
minute,
at
we're
that
looking
way.
at it as standalone perspective. And we're not taking it in proportion. We have no figures to back it up. We have no figures to say it's stimulated. People came out and they built the same number of houses with sprinkler systems in since we dropped the impact fee. You know, you say we're having 74 houses. We're not having 74 houses this year. I know that.
Well, that's what makes it very tough to analyze. There's been a
Sure it
lot of
does.
moving pieces
They bought a lot of
between the
these
tier
permits
map,
before.
the sprinkler legislation,
But John,
the bat systems. It's very difficult because it's not an apples to apples
Sure it's not.
perspective. What I'm saying is across the board, it's about 74 a year on average.
Right.
I understand
However, we're trying to preserve that and preserve the construction trade. Not trying to say we want to increase it by 20% or 25 or whatever the number will be. That would be great. However, with all the efforts this council has made and this county has made to try to reduce the impact associated with new residential development, at the best, we're hitting just the minimum target.
Well, Keith, I really appreciate that. And I know that we just approved road maintenance for 2 subdivisions that we had no relationship with because they didn't build any houses. Now, we've done that. Are there still more?
But, John, I would respond to your earlier comment, and I'm not too sure I would look at it and say, well, is it really dissuading a person from buying a home? I would look at it and say, why are we imposing $5,200 in additional costs that we don't have any real underlying rationale for?
Well, that's true. That's, like I
mean,
said,
there's
it's
no
2
extension-
issues that we're
There's
looking
really
at.
no extension of logic there that I can follow.
Sure.
Well, you done
No,
heard
I'm
me.
not-
I mean, to go, oh, sorry. But to kind of go off what we were talking about the underlying cause. I mean, because I've had some folks talk to me in the community about, we put impact fees in place for this reason, that to deal with the impact of new home construction. And, I guess I do wonder how true that is, because there is a perception in the community that that's why we have impact fees. And, I know that, school enrollment hasn't expanded all that much. I mean, this year it has, and I
It
think.
went up this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, they also
Been
rate.
relevant.
Incrementals
Yeah,
for
but-
the past
Incremental.
12 years.
Yeah, and this is only supposed to pay for the expansion of new schools. And I don't think we've expanded schools past decade. I mean, we built new schools to replace like West Salisbury, for
Replacement.
instance, replacement
Right.
schools. And so, I mean, I think we need to drill down on some of those numbers and be like, was this fee actually used to pay for the expansion that it was, the theory of 10 years ago or 15 years ago when this was put in place, It would be nice to see the Tischler report that I've heard so much about. It seems mythical out there. I've never seen a copy of it. We can go back and say, this is what was predicted. Let's go back and actually look to see if what they predicted was true. We have, 15, 10 years of experience and kind of see if that really took place. Because I know there's lots of people in the community saying, this was a very hard-fought thing to get into place, and there was really a need for it. There was, a commission that came up and said the need for it. But I think maybe the reality of the situation didn't match the theory at the time. And it would be good to, if that is the case, let's explain that to the public. And I think there would, be less, controversy over this. So.
Unicorns do exist.
All right. Well, let's if we can have
However,
copies
we'll
of
make
it.
sure that
You know,
council administrator has
this
copies.
one-
However, one of the things that you're looking at, again, this was predicated on a different time in the market. This was dedicated right before the bottom fell out.
You couldn't have done anything.
So to try to make it relevant to today's economy, and I think the metrics you're talking about are very good. They're reasonable. If I had the data, I could easily quantify it. However, it's been so subject to change that the accuracy or the validity of any assessment that I do beyond just saying we average roughly 74 single-family dwelling units a year and 30 multifamily really isn't very accurate beyond that. What I'm looking at it from, or the perspective we're talking about at the table, is the inequity, but also the preservation of the trade itself. And that's something that this council is going to have to consider. Are we seeing more tradespeople in the region working? And again, we've tried to do everything we can to incentivize it. And at what point do we say, why should we have an unnecessary or an additional constraint that's put on this one sector? That's $450,000 that could be trickling through the economy. In addition, if we can keep this maintenance of level with new housing constructs going up, at what point does the tax revenue do what it was supposed to do? And the tax revenue pays for the growth. Not the impact fee on the front end that's unfair for the person that might be buying an existing house, or unfair to the person that doesn't have children in school. That's the whole point of our tax rate. If our tax rate isn't enough to cover it, that's something that we need to analyze as a separate subject, right? But $450,000, again, to try to put any life into an ailing sector and look at the trades, the trade-offs are not going to be adverse or negative to where we are today.
Keith, what I'm afraid of, and what you're saying is absolutely true, that the trades do generate jobs, and we do need those trades in our county. And but our concern is, or my concern is, and we talked about our children not living in this state. The contiguous states have school taxes.
We're not allowed to do that.
I know, but the impact fee was supposed to be go for education. And so we don't have that luxury.
But again, let me follow that line of logic. If you build, I guess the thing I struggle with is, and I wasn't around with this, was imposed, but the thing I struggle with is the notion that the only impact of a new residence is on schools. There's a residence on police, there's a residence on fire service, there's an
Parks
impact
and Rec.
on roads, there's an impact. So again, what I struggle with is the underlying philosophy here, and I think the underlying philosophy is terribly flawed.
I think it's what Keith touched on. It was a different time. I mean, they
Yeah,
were
no, I
talking about
understand. I
APFOs
understand.
to pay for all the other stuff.
Wait,
We
Wayne?
settled with impact fees, but we were in the middle of a growth market.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Because I see in here it talks about development impact fees and school construction impact fees. Are those two? I mean, I know that I know we only have school construction impact fees to pay for schools, but it also talks about development impact fees. Are those used interchangeably? Are those two separate? And
Are you looking at chapter 130, just out of curiosity?
Yeah. I'm looking at the actual law.
Without seeing the context, maybe if I could just see a little more of it. I think what you're looking at is we have a distinct school impact fee.
Yeah.
Right.
However, there are other development fees that go along with the construction when you start talking about permitting and review.
Okay.
So, but I think in the beginning of chapter 130, there's definitions for all the words that are used.
Right.
And I'd recommend maybe looking at the definition of what development fee is versus a school impact fee.
Right.
But Wayne brings about a perfectly legitimate point. It's not uncommon, back in the time of APFOs, adequate public facility ordinances, again, when growth was skyrocketing in all the jurisdictions across the state, everybody wanted that famous saying, let growth pay for growth. Well, what does that mean today? I don't think whatever it means today is the same as what it meant 14 years ago. And as a matter of fact, when this study was done in 2004, They recommended a fee for roads. They recommended a fee, I believe, for community college as well. And at the time, the only thing the council at that point was comfortable with was the school impact fee. And I think moving forward collectively as a legislative body, the question is, what are you comfortable with at this point?
Well, the only reason I started this off with some type of proof of performance was because just really out of a matter of curiosity. I'd love to see what happened, because it's good for us. It's just good input for us across the board on anything that we might want
We
to.
could probably track that.
But times have changed so much, can you even do that?
Well, no, here, I can just give you a snapshot.
Right.
Good
Are you
times.
talking on the stimulus
Well,
that we did?
The
Yeah.
stimulus part of it.
We can
And
track
I
it.
know the numbers, the basic numbers, that's not a bad sell as it is, you know.
No.
You know,
We'll figure out something to bring back to you. The one thing, again, the challenge was the grants, the sprinkler legislation,
Yeah,
who
the
wanted to
sprinkler
come
kinda
in. So
turned
that
it all upside down.
skews the numbers so
Yeah.
disproportionately
I know.
that, again, the level of confidence.
Lots of-
But what we do know is we took 74 permits and turned them around in 6 months. That's what we usually do an average on. And some might say it's just front loading or rear loading. You still get the 74 one way or the other.
Right.
Well, last year, and I don't want to go too far into numbers because you guys know I'm a number geek, in FY15, we had 100 new constructs of single-family residential dwellings. Part of that is directly related to people coming in before the sprinkler regulations went into effect July 1st.
Sure.
The other part of it is going to be the moratorium on the school impact fee. But if you were to ask me what percentage is attributed to what program, I essentially don't know how to articulate that.
and it-
It's very difficult.
I know John made a comment about, would that make that much of a difference? If you're talking about, if most of our homes are selling at $150,000, it might not make a difference to the people, but it might make a difference to the bank. If they're going to seek financing, how much money they can borrow. Does this 3% push it over? Another thing that's kind of off this topic a little bit, but a fellow I know that's been building some homes, and he bought some of these permits before the sprinkler systems came in. I mean, he's building nice homes and renting them because they won't appraise for what he's got in them.
That's the other issue.
I mean, these homes, he's building $250,000, $300,000 homes that won't appraise for
Well,
what he's got in, so he's renting them
Yeah,
with
the other
options
issue-
to buy. He's doing whatever he can do to get them out,
Yeah, the
so-
other issue on appraisal is that the sprinkler systems and the BAT systems,
They don't appraise for anything.
they don't appraise for anything
Yeah.
right now because you don't have any comps out there. So it does have a negative impact on finance underwriting. I don't think there's any question of that. How much of an impact, I don't know, but it's not helpful. Again, you come back to, this is a barrier over which we have complete control. And do we think that the barrier is worthwhile? And I would argue that from a fiscal standpoint, it's so de minimis right now that why have a barrier in place while we're still struggling in that sector? And why have an impact that's associated with only one public service?
It's a tax burden that's really not serving that much for purpose.
Yeah.
In order to recoup the impact fee, if we were losing the impact fee, 3 years on an average price home, we will recover all that back in taxes. Not to mention what we will have done through the workforce and income taxes in building the 3.2% piggyback tax. Plus, we have that house for perpetuity until till we're gone. Whereas the impact fee is a one-time shot, and that's it. Easy money, we're out.
Well, it's easy money, but we still have the tax benefit also.
Excuse me?
Easy money, but we still have the tax money also.
You still have the tax money coming in also, but you've got the long range. Why put $5,200 in if you're going to go ahead and go for a longer range and try to increase your population?
Some people call it a double whammy, John.
It's like a regressive tax. So,
Any other questions? What's our time frame?
Needs to be introduced at the next meeting.
60 days, right?
Yeah.
Yes, if it's not emergency.
Yeah. No,
Well,
it's
you
not.
obviously had some handouts for us. Did you decide not to give them to us? Aren't those handouts for us that you're holding in your hand?
That's your brief book on that.
Oh, we're paperless.
Sure.
We're paperless.
Yeah,
Thank you, gentlemen.
thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
After this, or you all just gonna discuss it?
Whatever you want, I mean, legislative discussion, certainly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want. Do we have topics that are open?
I had
know
four-
Delegate Anderson's here as well.
I had four, John, that I wanted to talk about. It's on there every year. We're gonna keep it on there, highway user revenue. But I think we have to pay attention to this paid sick leave bill. I think that's a very, very damaging bill. Community college collective bargaining is something we really need to pay attention to. We still need the state's next installment on the Purdue Stadium funding, so it's important that we see that finds its way into the budget. Those are really the four that I felt, at least at this point in time, that we had to talk about.
On this highway user revenue, can you get an exact figure of what we have lost? I know we've
Yeah,
heard
we can
35 million, 40 million, whatever.
Yeah, we can calculate.
You know, if it had been given the same, it would be interesting to see, because that's
Yeah.
that's monies that would have gone into roads that we've not.
Yeah, I had that, it's probably about 2 years old,
Yeah.
I'll update it.
Okay.
Mark?
Probably poultry, state poultry legislation and regulation. I mean, that seems to be a hot topic. So, I mean, in terms of what's coming up legislatively, but also, obviously the regulation, environmental regulation.
Yeah, maybe proactive measures to avoid the phosphorus management tool debacle that occurred, whether there's anything necessary that we need to anticipate. That's what you're suggesting, Mark? I hate to speak for you,
Yeah, I
because
mean,
you
yeah, I
speak
mean,
better
something
than I
along those
do.
lines. I mean, just in general, what they see coming, and in terms of, state versus county jurisdiction even, we can, I mean, 'cause I know that Delegate Anderson's office gets calls about our zoning issues. We get calls about state environmental regulation.
Right.
Trying to, be on the same page with all the sort of, because we're hearing from the same people with the same concerns, but we each have different levels of jurisdiction over it, so.
I have two issues that I'd like to say on. One of them is an air monitor on the lower Eastern Shore. We know they have an air monitor in Talbot, they have one on the upper Eastern Shore, but we don't have one on the lower. Go ahead, Joe.
They got one at Blackwater, I've been told.
That's what I mean.
Oh,
But that's not considered the lower Eastern Shore, is it?
Right.
Depends on how low you want to get, I guess.
It seemed to be a concern when we were looking at regulating the construction, locating, and use of poultry houses. Now it's not a concern anymore, health issues, and air quality was one of the things that we were concerned about. So we took this poultry house issue and we addressed that tonight. But let's face it, half of the people that were coming out here had issues with health quality. And are we going to look at that? We're going to stick our heads back in the sand and pretend that it's not an issue?
I think John pretty much explained that earlier, that the state's the one that monitors that. So, I mean, do we want to go there, or,
Well, we can stick our heads back in the sand and pretend like it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But let's face it,
I think John Sandy wants the state to monitor down here.
I would love to see a monitor down here, number one.
You're not saying the county should do it.
No, I'm not saying the county.
Well, I think, John, I've used this analogy before, and I don't know how
Funny.
solid it is, but if planes were flying too low into the Salisbury Airport, the Wycomico County Airport, and they were knocking off the tops of trees, and it was happening consistently, they wouldn't go to Wycomico County for that. They would talk to the Federal Aviation Administration about that.
Oh,
That's why
no,
there's
they
different
wouldn't.
agents. They can call us, but are we gonna pass an ordinance that dictates how high that plane can fly or how low? Again, I'm not saying this is perfect.
No,
but
we're
trying
going to the
give you an
state.
idea.
These are issues we'd like the state to
There's
look
some
at.
reason
I
you go
mean,
to the
they
state,
have.
some reason you go to the federal, and they handle it. We're not hiding our head in the sand.
No,
We're just trying to place that responsibility to
in the right area.
to the agency
And the
that
state is the
oversees
right
it.
area to replace it in, or to place it in, isn't it?
Well, to the air quality issue, particularly on poultry, in the health impact assessment, one of the recommendations that was made by Lurid Rooster was that the state needs to undertake or should undertake a air quality study directly related to poultry. The lady who spoke earlier apparently didn't read that part of the report. So, but we can't do that. We don't have any sanction from the state to do that. But we could talk to the state about whether or not the state believes it's in the state's best interest to perhaps further investigate that.
I could live with that.
Right. Second issue is, and I think we've all talked about this, is that I believe everybody is somewhat uncomfortable with MDE's position that they inspect a CAFO
Right.
every 5 years.
Right.
And one of the things that we've discussed with Laurie is can we make an arrangement, a tacit arrangement with the state health department that if our inspectors see something that they think is untoward with regard to a poultry operation, CAFO operation, can they then transmit that or communicate that to the appropriate state
Now,
personnel? And it should be firmed up better than just a handshake.
right, and it may not necessarily come through the health department. It could come through zoning or compliance, since we know that the state's not going to help
No,
us.
that
Health
gets
department
sticky.
already has a formal relationship
Right.
with MDE through
Exactly.
environmental health, so it makes perfect
Exactly.
sense.
Yeah, we're reinventing the wheel. If our inspectors notified the appropriate health department personnel, that could trigger a response that might not otherwise take place. So while the state has not given the county authority in that area, perhaps we could put something in place where we would have at least some level of inspection authority that would then be referred to the state.
Well, the state interprets that as the tail wagging the dog. The state is in charge of overseeing that industry.
If it's
And when
right.
the state wants the
When it's
Wycomico County
broken.
Health Department to
Right.
inspect it, they'll tell the Wycomico County Health Department to inspect it.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And-
But don't
and-
you think somebody's gonna tell the state? I mean, apparently if they oversee it, as you're saying, that as strictly as you're saying that they do, they could have been here and they could have cut what we did in half by saying, we got control over it and this is what we're gonna do. But apparently they haven't come down here and said that. So apparently it's our baby. And just like he said, to monitor the air, I think we need to ask the state or whoever it is, I mean, they got it in Talbot and Dorchester. What's the problem getting it here, as he's saying?
And if MDE's had this policy for 10 years, the environmental situation, the environmental impact, and people who have represented our county have changed in the last 10 years or 5 years. So if this policy's been in effect, maybe it's time for a policy change on the state level.
And John just wants to talk about it at the meeting.
I understand. I was getting ready to ask
I
you.
know.
Put it on the agenda.
I was getting ready to ask you, John. Did you say you had
Off the
four?
rails.
John, did you say you had 4 items?
Pardon me?
Did you say you had 4 items or 2 items you wanted to discuss?
Just do it.
So that's,
Well, actually, it's 3. It was health inspections, which you just talked about, with the MDE monitoring. The airborne particulates, which I think should go to state also, and state should do a study on air particulates.
Do you also want to talk to the delegation about the runway extension and the time compression that we're in?
Yes.
That's important.
okay.
Right.
The other question I had, I don't know, Carl, I don't know if you can help us on this, but I was under the impression that when they increased the gas tax, that they also very cavalier, they're very cavalier about it. They made it so that it would increase every year or every so many years automatically,
Cycles up every 6
which
months?
I think some of the delegates in the minority felt that was taxation without representation. You're increasing the tax, and you're not even taking a vote, you're not even publicly getting any input. So I think maybe that could be something, it could be, an effort in futility, but I think. It would be in futility, yeah, but I think we should talk to them, trying to turn that around a little bit as to whether or not they.
Should have done what they did in Delaware, wait till all-time prices were at an all-time low and raise it 9 cents while nobody was looking.
Anything else?
Anything else, John? Yeah, I think you've presented 4 good topics, and we've got a couple more there.
Good.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for
Appreciate
your
it.
time.
Thank you.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.